Hi, Tim.
Good morning.
It's so nice to see you, and it's so nice to see you smiling because I think the last time we spoke was in June, and since then it's been almost impossible to get to talk to you. So I'm really thrilled you agreed to speaking with me today. And in fact, this is my second Zoomside chat, and I'm thrilled to have you because I've always tried to study, about how to make choices. And the word dilemma comes to mind, which means there is no easy answer. And the reason probably I didn't get a chance to connect with you, even though we've been collaborating fairly constantly over the past 5+ years now. Can you believe it's been over 5 years?
Wow.
And still, the last 3 months, you were shut out because you were, I assume, consumed. And I was hoping today we'll catch up and talk about what happened.
Well, Krishna, it's my great pleasure to be with you. You have been a great friend and a great mentor, and we have really done some interesting things, and you've had an enormous impact on my leadership, on my life, and anything I can do to connect with you, I always take the opportunity to do it. So you're right. These past, since March, when the schools were closed down by the governor, we have all been in a dilemma about which way to go, and making choices and trying to navigate the ever-changing landscape of COVID-19 and the pandemic and the community's response and your staff and faculty's response certainly has presented a lot of challenges over these past several months. So particularly with coming back to school in late August, early September, certainly presented some significant challenges. And we're at another cross point very soon to make another transition in our educational model.
Tim, just so that the people who may be watching it, our friends and family and others, do not have any context of who you are. And since this is not a formal interview and a conversations, maybe you can talk a little bit about paint the picture of the landscape you live in on a daily basis.
So I'm a school superintendent in a large school district, about 5,500 students and about 720 faculty and staff. I'm very proud of the work that we do here with children. I think we offer some spectacular programs, but all those have been impacted by COVID, and how have we been able to navigate? I've been a superintendent in this school district for 13 years. And I can tell you that even on my worst days, I really enjoy my job. I like doing the things I'm doing because at the end of the day, you think about purpose and you think about what is your legacy that you would like to leave behind. And I think every day I have the opportunity to build that legacy, impact kids, impact adults. So I really like it, even on the worst days. When it's very difficult and challenging and can't always see a clear picture of what to do. I'm somewhat satisfied even on those days.
Wow, because that's actually, you're very blessed. And I think not just blessed, I think it's the preparation and the work you have done all these years, which has built that resilience, I would say, and the character to deal with these challenges. Because I know of another superintendent in another school district who basically said, this is not what I signed up for, because it was extremely challenging. There's no way to satisfy and come up with an answer that anybody is truly happy with. So he decided to retire. So I am actually quite thrilled to hear, because as I said, when you went quiet on me, I didn't have a clue what was going on, right? And but I had obviously the faith that you would deal with it, but I have no idea how you did, and that's really what I wanted to capture today. So if you could maybe walk me through what happened in the last 3 months once you go, and maybe a little bit of the color of what goes on in your head. And more importantly, before I forget, how did it impact you? How did you deal with it? What did you do to stay healthy, for example, both mentally and physically?
So, as you know, I am a practicing, I do a lot of practicing with mindfulness and in particular meditation. And probably in 2015, I began that practice of trying to come to grips with what is going on in the here and the now and what's going on and to become more aware of my circumstances, the people around me, the things that are impacting me. And I can tell you that practice has enabled me to garner the courage to walk through these challenges because as you rightfully admitted or pointed out, the right answer is out there somewhere, but not everybody agrees what that right answer is for things that you do. And in particular, there is so much information about COVID and the impact of COVID and how children respond to it, how adults respond to it, and that it's changing every day as we learn more and more about the virus. So what we thought we knew in June is different than what we know today or what we think we know today.
Beautifully said, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you that I'm blessed to have a really strong team around me. So in addition to the personal things that I do, you know, it's mind, body, and spirit, and trying to take care of myself so I can bring my best self to others. That's not always easy to do, and I really tried to be disciplined about that. And I think that's one of the things that helped me kind of navigate the waters. So, but specifically, you know, I've been fortunate to have good people around me, great leaders around me that we all go through our ebbs and flow of emotions and how we feel. But I've been fortunate to have some people really push forward and move the path forward. So, you know, how do you make decisions? You make it based upon what's the best information you have at this time. And you have to look at the research, but you also have to take feedback from your constituents. And I don't just mean my parents, which are critically important, but from kids, from other administrators, from school boards. They all have a stake in the decisions that we make. And my role is really try to give them our best thinking all the time and really put that forward as at this time, this is our best thinking. And that doesn't always appease everybody in the community, doesn't always appease everybody in the workplace, but it's been an unusual ride. And like I said, you know, I'm far from perfect. I do ebb and flow just like everybody else. One time when you think you have a problem resolved, the next time it's not resolved or it comes undone. You just have to be open and you know, it's kind of like the definition of mindfulness, non-judgmental awareness. And you just kind of have to sit through those feelings and sit through those experiences to kind of get through them. I don't think I have a great answer of how we navigated it, but having a support network, having good people around you, having supportive practices that you do on your personal self, I think all those are helpful to help navigate through difficult times.
It's funny, I said this is not an interview and it's almost becoming like an interview. It's not a conversation. So I apologize for that. But I think I packed too many questions into that last week because I've been curious, right? I mean, you're the classic governor of 10,000, 15,000 people group because you have, you know, the 6,000 kids, you have the parents, I mean, maybe even 20,000, 25,000 people. If you look at, as you say, all the stakeholders involved who it impacts, right? It impacts the lives of teachers, it impacts the lives of parents, it impacts the lives of kids. And so you're really a microcosm of a country, of a state. And so, and you, actually, it's funny you said 2015 because that's the year we met. And it's or maybe 2014, but right around the time I think you started practicing mindfulness, I think that's probably brought us together. And interestingly, what I noticed was even when we wanted to build a mindful nation, we said if we can't start with building a mindful community, the chances of building a mindful nation is pretty much out of question. So that's, I think, all the more I was curious to see how you navigated this, simply because it's a dilemma. There's no easy answer, and there are two sides, and neither is going to agree with with whatever comes up with. And long time ago, I always made this little chart, A on one side and B on the other. And I said, if you draw a line from A to B, and no matter what solution you pick, it's a compromise, right? And the definition of a compromise is this person gave up something, this person gave up something. So nobody is fully happy because both gave up something. But you got to come up with a workable solution that can function. So one idea I had was, don't look for a solution where each one gives up something. Try for a solution outside this line, where I called it the arc of opportunity, where the needs of both sides are met. And I had the privilege of working with a gentleman, Marshall Rosenberg, who built an incredible program called Nonviolent Communication. Did you ever come across that, Tim? Yeah, so that practice of how to bring pretty much people on absolute opposites, how to come together. The strategy was really to get to the bottom of the needs, basic needs of both constituents, and finding an answer that actually met both. And one of the examples he gave was husband wants to go fishing and the wife wants to go visit her mother. How do you do both? Right? Because both are important. Somebody wants to visit her ailing mother, and he desperately wants to go fishing because this is the last weekend in the season, let's say. And so most of the time it ends up in an argument where I want to go fishing and you don't care about my needs, and the other person says, I haven't seen my mom, I really want to, and you don't care about my mother. I mean, that's a pretty typical ending of a conversation where neither is happy, and it's kind of gets contentious. But the simple answer is find a lake near mom's house, right? But because we get into this mode, it's mine or yours. And I'm curious if you had to deal with, especially in this situation, there were needs, right? There was the daycare needs, there was health safety needs for teachers, for parents, all kinds of study needs. And so I'm just absolutely curious to see how many of those factors you acknowledged, and how did you consider weighing them in your decision, and how did you just go about it? I'm just very fascinated just to hear about from your perspective.
So I want to go back to one thing that you said, and I want to add to it. You said before you can create a mindful nation, you have to create a mindful community. But I would say before you create a mindful community, you have to create a mindful self, right?
Will not challenge it. In fact, thank you for adding it.
So there are competing needs, and I mean, we are, as you said, we're a microcosm of our society. And one only needs to scan any newspaper or any TV station, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, to see that there are some, there are some views on far ends of both right and left. And I think what we lack, and you pointed it out, was the ability to compromise and the ability to find some common ground. And that has been the most challenging situation, that it's either all or nothing for some people. And I'm really proud of our community, and I'm, and on the other hand, concerned that some of the issues were so divisive, whether to come back to school or not come back to school, or it really was divisive in our community. And I'm hoping that we get back to the point where we're rebuilding those connections with people, and that's going to take a long time. So the COVID will have a negative impact on our world and our lives, but also this rift and divide is going to have a negative impact on us too. So we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I hope things like the Mindful Nation, there are things that we can do to help people come together. There are proven strategies, even dealing with the Black Lives Matter and the whole the diversity, equity, and inclusion issue. Certainly is a challenging issue to deal with, but we know even things like that, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is that self-awareness is so critical to making headway. So mindfulness has a role in everything that we do and everything that we're experiencing now. The loss that some of us have experienced because of COVID, the frustration that people have, that their children aren't able to participate in school the way that they thought we could. That self-awareness is so critical. And I really think that mindfulness is one of the pathways to healing our country.
Wow. It's interesting you brought COVID having a negative effect. I'm usually a very extremely optimistic person and a hopeful person, and as usual, and you talked about two things, COVID and divided. So we were divided before COVID. So I think it's almost, and so I was hoping in the past, and when I ran a company and so on, we always would put an external target, a competitor or something else that we would all want to beat. So they always said, right, an external enemy. So I was hoping COVID would be that external enemy that is affecting everybody, not just one faction of society. And therefore we can come together. And I had personal experience of this back in the mid-'80s when I lived in rural Tennessee, where people lived far apart, had a lot of land, so they didn't really know their neighbors. And then news came that they were planning to put a nuclear waste plant in that county. Boom, everybody started to connect together and say, we can have that in our backyard. Started collaborating, having a meeting with their elected officials, so on and so forth, and were successful in not getting that waste plant in their county. In the process, they all became lifelong friends. And having had that positive story in my mind, I was hoping COVID would say, uh-oh, we got to get together and tackle this and get it out of our lives. But obviously that did not happen.
Well, why do you think that is the case? I mean, what's your supposition about that?
I think we were too divided to begin with. So that's the point why I said you brought up both issues. We were so divided to begin with that it's easy to split this. I mean, and then I go back to another. I came to the US in '84, and if I recall, in the 70s, there was an election in my state in India where the two persons standing for chief minister, which is like the governor of a state, it was really simple. One said helmet for scooters and motorcycles. Other one says no helmets. That was the main platform, right? I mean, everybody knows what a helmet can do.
Yeah.
For you, especially in a scooter, where I think at that time, 15 people were getting killed a day in my town. Run over mostly by a bus or a truck. With that data, people took the stand of helmet and no helmet. I mean, it's almost so deja vu, mask, no mask.
Yeah.
Because, and then at least helmet and no helmet was stark, right? Here you can say, well, what's the proof and so on. Whereas helmet, no helmet, I don't know if there is proof needed anymore, even at that time. But that's how it happens. You can easily take things, split it up, so that if you're divided, it's easy to capitalize on that. So you're right in that it's going to take a lot of work, which means what is that work required? Again, these two divided parties, I don't think either of them wants to see the ruin of our country. So that is a common goal, right? And so it almost takes an incredible facilitation group of sorts. And that may not be one person. It may be, it builds up from neighbors going to the base, because neighbors can be divided, right? But usually they have common goals. They have the same road in front of them. You know, their kids play in the playground together. So I feel we got to get to the very bottom and start building bridges based on common things that we all care about. And I know that we care about very similar things if we get to the very basics and start building it up from scratch and not let external forces divide us.
Yeah, right on, spot on. And I think that happens. I don't think it's going to be a mass healing of the divide overnight. I think it's going to be those smaller micro experiences that we're able to develop, the capacity to talk to neighbors, to talk to each other. And, you know, I always have a goal, you know, it's right intent, you know. If you come with the right intent, positive intent, I'll talk to you about anything. But if your intent is to do harm or, you know, that makes it much more difficult. So, you know, I will meet with anybody as long as their intent is to resolve what their concerns are and they're willing to listen. I don't ask you to always agree with me, but at least, you know, understand the perspective from which I viewed this. And I've had to walk different groups through my decision-making process.
Wow.
And in my mind, it was a very logical, sequential, these are the things that we considered. This is the, and it really wasn't one issue. There were multiple issues. But even after explaining that to groups, they disagree with me still. And I guess you have to deal with that ambiguity and you have to be able to deal with those feelings. That's what, again, I'll go back to mindfulness is one of the things that I go back to just make me more self-aware of how I'm feeling about different people. I may be mad at a different group of people for whatever reason, but at least now I'm aware that I'm walking into the situation in a different frame of mind, and I'm trying to come back to what is their positive intent? What do they want? And, you know, there is a common goal for our kids, and that's to provide a quality education. Unfortunately, people think right now there are different ways to provide a quality education. And, you know, I just have to give my community my best thinking based upon all of the issues that I know. And I don't expect them to know everything from staffing issues to who's eligible for family medical leave to scheduling to cleaning. But, you know, what you hope is you build trust. And I've tried to build trust over 13 years that I've been here, successful at most points. But I know that I have some work to do to rebuild some trust in some of my community too. So that now.
Wow, this is such a, we could go on for this for hours, but I know we don't have hours. You just said so many cool things in that set of statements, Tim, and I almost want to recount a couple of them. One of them is really what you talked about. For me, it was a sequential, logical progress of making these choices. But you and I both know logic doesn't work because we mostly make decisions based on emotion. So that's why I felt Marshall Rosenberg. I mean, me as an engineer, I subscribe to that, but I fail miserably doing that because you assume people make decisions using logic. And so if you lay it out perfectly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, everybody's with you. But I'm sure you have the experience of that not working either.
Well, you and I have had this conversation before about systems thinking.
Yes.
You are a big systems thinking, and sometimes I tell you, you just got to do things, and they will have impact on throughout, but you just got to do them. And if you think they're right, sometimes you have to make those decisions. I'm not immune to emotion. You know, I would say in that, what I view as a logical sequential thought, emotions were just as important as evidence-based research and the information we were getting back. So I would say that you know, you talk often about JQ, judgment quotient. You know, there are many factors that go into making those decisions all along the way. And some of it is just gut reaction. Some of it is, what's my experience been in this? How am I feeling about this? So that's a piece of the cake that you're baking, but it's never the whole piece.
That's right. That's right. It's so in the process, what I have kind of discovered is, again, you brought mindfulness a couple of times, and I actually use the phrase being mindful, which means being extremely aware and present to what's going on. Because again, mindfulness has so many definitions and perceptions. Being mindful, I mean, we use that phrase everywhere, right? Be mindful. I mean, I tell my son when he was swinging a golf club in the living room, be mindful of, you know, the photo frame or your sister, you know, because swinging a golf club could hurt somebody inside the house. Or I might tell my wife, be mindful while you back out the car because I forgot to move the trash can, right? And usually trash can is below what you can see in the rearview mirror, and not every car has backup cameras. And so you could run over a trash can. So being mindful is really about being aware of what's going on. And that is the step, is about being mindful of your own situation, but also having some awareness of what is the other person going through, right? I mean, just think about it. You know, I do a lot of workshops for CEOs and so on about how to make decisions in real time. Even there, every CEO is not the same. The CEO of a video gaming company and the CEO of a restaurant during COVID are wholly two different people. One's livelihood is totally at risk. One is actually booming.
Right.
You know, the video game industry just went through the roof because people were at home and playing games. On the other side, a person who owns 7 restaurants, let's say that's all their risk, is completely in tows. Imagine the decision making of those two people about shutting down, or their feelings, not decision making, just their feelings, right? And I think I've shared this with you. There's a beautiful Upton Sinclair quote that says, it's difficult for a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. That's the bias, right? That is the definition of bias. So when our mind is clouded, and you brought up JQ, when your mind is clouded, your judgment is impaired. There's no question about it. And it could be mood, it could be stress, it could be threat, it could be hyperfocus. So right now, usually threats in 21st century were more perceived threats. I may lose my job, okay? I may lose, the market may crash. But this time it's become more of an existential threat, right? It's health, it's actually life and death. You're seeing people around you die. Your children get sick. I mean, you know, we experience that at home. So it's very real. It's not perceived anymore. And when that is the case, it affects you very differently from an emotional perspective in terms of how you make decisions. You are clouded. So it's about how do you take the fog out, you know, or at least wait for the fog to settle before you can make big decisions. And all those, I think we got to kind of acknowledge first so that we know it's going on. And if we don't acknowledge, they are invisible forces controlling our moves. And that can be dangerous, you know, for a long term. And you pack too many things. And then you talk about systems thinking and the language. So there's a beautiful book came out this March called Upstream. And Dan Heath, great author, who I have the privilege of knowing a little bit, I loved his simplification of systems thinking to upstream and downstream. simple concepts. Everybody knows a stream, and the whole book starts with a kind of, I'm paraphrasing it, a story. Two guys are sitting by the side of a river, and they see a kid floating down the river. So one of them jumps into the river, first of all, takes his clothes off, jumps into the river, saves the child, brings him ashore, and they see another child go by. Second guy jumps in, saves the child, and then they see a third child going by. They keep doing this for a while till one of them starts putting on his clothes and his shoes, and the other guy asks him, "What are you doing? There are children coming down the river." He says, "You go save them. I'm going up to see who is throwing the kids into the river."
I've heard that story before, yes.
And that's really, I think, what we want to. If something is happening downstream, and even I can relate it back to things like how to address in the COVID situation. In the SARS situation, a group of people who were credited for not letting it become a pandemic, if I recall correctly, were just 8 people in Ottawa who were studying murmur in local languages all over the country, all over the world. So they actually found out that something odd was going on in a small province somewhere 6 weeks before the English papers started publishing it. And those people, the entire budget was somewhere $800,000 to $1 million a year. And they didn't, from what I was told, didn't get funded to continue that work. That I would call as upstream work, right? Some people studying murmurs in various languages across the world to see if something out of the ordinary is going on. But we wouldn't, anytime somebody presents a proposal, a grant, you're familiar with grant writing, it gets incredible levels of scrutiny for small amounts of money relative to $2 trillion that is dumped in order to fix the downstream problem. That is a classic example of lack of systems thinking, right? Prevention, and we've heard this before, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But those all adages are all examples of systems thinking where if you kind of map out the whole thing and you can fix a little thing, the downstream impact of it is largely mitigated.
So 2 days ago, I went and got a flu shot. And when I was at the pharmacist, she said, "You really need to get the shingles shot." And I had not thought about it. Over 50, you should get a shingles shot. But she said, "This will save you immense pain." So the little bit of pain you may have experienced now, you get a sore arm, will far be outweighed by if you get shingles. And it's a very painful, from what I understand, it's a very painful and difficult virus to overcome. So that's another example of kind of upstream thinking about, we need to get vaccinations so that we don't end up getting something. You may not know anybody with shingles right now, but if it's you or if it's a family member, you will wish you would have got that shingles vaccine at some point.
I'm glad you brought it up. I want to get it. Is it available? Shingles?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'll go get one because I've been waiting a year for it. Because I do, unfortunately, know somebody. My daughter's godmother has it, and it is extremely painful. And so when I was told, I said, sign me up, because having seen her struggle with it, and it's a chronic situation.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've shared this with you, Tim. It's, I believe problems are of only 2 kinds, acute or chronic, right? And the human nature is to not take the big acute right now, delay. But what do we do by making that choice? We make it chronic, right? And you can look at it like that, acute or chronic, or I look at it in math, compound interest. So it's about interest. You take a loan, you don't pay it off right away. What happens?
Catches up with you.
It accumulates interest at a compounding level, right? And so most of the people who have credit card debts, they don't even realize that by paying the minimum amount, you're really not remotely eroding the balance you pay. And these are educated people who know, but because the key is you've been sold that solution, whether it's how much can you afford a month? oh, I can afford $200 a month. So the loan is taken in such a way the payment is $200 a month. Where how much of the principal is being taken out is never spoken about. Out of that $200, 195 could be interest. It
Right.
means you're not really paying that principal. And then you have many interest-only loans, which means you haven't touched the principal. So these are different kinds of things. I know we are going into decision-making of various kinds. Coming back to what you were talking about, which is being aware of the forces that are within you, being aware of what the other person, which you can call empathy, right? Being empathic towards the challenges that they are. I mean, the two CEOs that I gave you, the person who runs a video gaming company versus the person who runs a bunch of restaurants. I mean, they are in two very different places. I mean, one is about, truly one existential threat on one case, boom on the other. And the way they look at it, the world at that point, their view of the whole, how's this 2020 going? If you ask these two people, I mean, you'd get diametrically opposite perspectives, which brings us back to the bird and the fish looking at a boat. And, you know, a lot of people, not a lot of people, a few people have heckled at the simplicity of that story. But I keep getting reminded that what we are looking at right now is the bird and the fish, even the division, right? One is looking at it from one vantage point and the other one is looking at another vantage point, when technically both are right to a certain degree.
Yeah, and so let's go back to talking about the decision-making process during COVID. Being empathetic towards, I don't always know what the family is going through. I'll have two families. One says, I want to keep my kids home until there's a vaccine. The other one says, my kids need to get 5 days of school. Well, one family may have two working partners and they can't afford to stay home and there's no supervision for the child. The other family may have a grandparent helping out. So it's important for us as leaders to be empathetic, to try to understand perspectives that people are coming to the table with. That bird and the fish is a great analogy of, they're both right, they're just in two different situations. And can we find some common ground that addresses the needs of both? And I think that's what our struggle is as leaders, is to find common ground, because sometimes that's unacceptable to both sides. But that's where you end up sometimes. My intent is always to do what I think is the best for our kids and our community. And I hope people keep that in perspective too, that I'm looking at a much broader picture of our community rather than just this narrowly focused perspective that you're bringing to the table.
That's beautifully stated, Tim, because even again, microcosm, we talk about microcosms. Even a family is a microcosm of society, right? I mean, two parents. Yeah. Two parents don't tend to agree on everything about how to raise a child, for example. And we went through that in our own home. And the way I was able to, or we were able to come together using your phrase common ground, is what would you like our child to have? What kind of habits? What kind of values? So again, you go to the basics. And if you go down to that level, you'll find that you most likely find agreement. One doesn't want them to be a cheat and the other one wants them to be honest. Most of them would say, I want my child to be honest, or our child to be honest. So I think that is the way to kind of start. What are the basic elements that we want to achieve for the kids, for the teachers, and so on, where it's almost undisputed. And then you can go to how do we achieve them, right? Why are we, first of all, why are we here? Then what would we all like to see happen? And then find solutions, how to achieve them, which may include a third element. For example, you gave a real life situation, two parents both working because they can't afford not to, and therefore they want their kids to go to school as the only option. But there could be a third option, which is some other care, which we organize as a community because there are a lot of people who are in the position of offering care,
Right.
right? And there are a lot of places that could, if we got together and say, you know what, for those families that need help in this time, maybe we have community daycare. I'm just making this up, right? In a large facility where it's not like everybody's getting together. So you can accomplish physical distancing. You can meet all the criteria and then offer solutions as a third place so that you're now bringing together the elements that are required to make this move forward, you know? And that kind requires, you said a key phrase, open to listening, need not agree, but open to listening. And recently I was in another group of people asking the same question, how do we bridge the divide? And there, they were all talking about strategies. And one of the questions I asked was, I think the first challenge is to learn how to open closed minds. If your mind is completely shut, you can't hear what the other person says. So your phrase, open to listening, I think is step one. And then how do you go to open to listening? Go to some very basic things that is undisputed what both parties want for as outcomes.
And I would say that, again, I'll step you one back and say, you know, we need to personally become self-aware. And we've talked being mindful is one of the strategies, or meditation. And once you are aware of the thoughts and feelings of yourself, maybe you become more aware, or I guess there's research that suggests you become more open and aware. I don't know if the word open, more aware of other people's thoughts and feelings, so that you do know people bring different perspectives and they're not all wrong. So got to start with self, work out to the community, work out to the nation. That's what the Mindful Nation wants to do, right?
Wow. So that's a great ending. So in the end, maybe with a quote, what you're basically getting at is Gandhi's quote of be the change you want to see in the world, right? Starts with
That's
you.
absolutely right. I was going to say amen, but.
Awesome. Hey, thank you. I know you have enough to do. And so glad that we were able to actually get together like this and talk about pretty complex topics, though.
And it was a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you, Tim.
Thanks.
This is Krishna Pendyala wishing you all well and reminding you to always be open to new perspectives. Take care.